Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Zarnowski with Special Olympics Maryland. Thank you for taking some time this evening for us to talk through some things related to the upcoming, or I guess for some folks, the already started bowling season. We'll keep this brief, but there are some things to go over for this. So if you do have questions, you can either raise your hand in the control panel that you have or type them in. I'm going solo tonight, so it may be that I need to wait until the end to take the questions, but we'll go through and hopefully we'll be able to answer most, if not everything, that all the questions that you've got. As you may know, also we're in the process of hiring a new sport director. We're saddened that Kristen Mullins, who was the sport lead for bowling last year for the staff, has accepted a position with one of the local school systems. That was just a phenomenal opportunity. So we'll miss her, but we are looking to have someone new in place relatively quickly. So that said, let's move along. And so the agenda for tonight, we'll go over the registration deadline, some rule updates and reminders, how to qualify for the state championship, a little bit on the regional tournaments, touch on the coaches code of conduct, some Q&A, and administrative slides. And of course, the slides from tonight, as well as a link to the recording for the webinar, will be emailed possibly tonight, more likely tomorrow. As a general reminder, and hopefully this is not a surprise for anyone, that no athlete, no volunteer may participate in any way, shape, or form with Special Olympics without a valid and current medical for the athlete or a valid and current volunteer application, including their protected behaviors for any volunteer. And there are absolutely no exceptions to this policy. There's no grace period. There's nothing like that. That's an absolute that they need to have that. So that said, this is our standard registration process that we've had for several years. If anybody on the line is new, the general process is we get everybody registered in our computer system as participating in training. You then have a few days for any forms that, for anybody new or any who turned in some new forms at your first practices to get them in to headquarters, and then we have a couple competition registration deadlines. So going through that, again, the training registration deadline by when you need to have everybody who's participating in your program into the computer system is September 24th. That's all your athletes, all your partners, your coaches, your volunteers, including your lane assistants. And this establishes who's eligible to participate in the regional and state bowling tournaments. I should also point out, even if you have someone who you know has no intention of going on to the bowling tournaments, get them in. This is our way of tracking how many athletes are participating in the program and which sports, and this is really essential. The other thing to note is this is the deadline by which the information needs to be in GMS, which is our computer system. In most cases, you are not going to be the one who puts it into GMS. There's probably a few exceptions. It's someone in your area program who's doing that for you. So he or she is going to need that information probably a little bit before that date for any of those dates. So just be sure to talk to whoever handles it for your county. If you haven't already been in touch with them, I would suggest you do it tonight. You reach out to them tonight or tomorrow to find out when they need to get it from you, so they can get it in. It's not, you can't expect them to get it from you the day that it's due and turn it around and get it in unless they've made arrangements ahead of time for that. So work with them. If you don't know who the person is in your county who handles this for you, contact your area director, and he or she will be able to give you that information. As I mentioned, and then also, again, anybody who submitted after that date, we certainly want to capture that information that they're participating in the program, but they would not be eligible for either the regional or state competitions. As I indicated before, we know that you get some outstanding medicals with your first couple practices. Anything that's outstanding needs to be into headquarters by October 5th. And it needs to be for everyone at that point. They need to have all of their forms and certifications valid through December 2nd. That's the date of the state tournament. We don't have any forms, anything expiring mid-season anymore. Again, that's not, don't misconstrue this to mean that you can have an athlete or a volunteer participating without having their forms turned into you. This is the time when you need to get those forms headed up to headquarters. Again, no one can participate without a valid medical or, in the case of volunteers, a valid volunteer certification. So for athletes, it's their medical. For volunteers, partners, and coaches, it's their volunteer application as well as their protective behavior certification needs to be in and valid through December 2nd. And then for coaches, there's also the concussion certification, which has been around for 3 years or so now. Again, all valid through December 2nd. We then have the competition registration deadline for the regional tournaments, which is October the 18th. That's the date by which you need to get the events that your athletes are participating in, whether it's singles, doubles, or unified doubles, into GMS, as well as their average entered as well by that date. And again, your person who handles GMS for you is actually going to be the person who does that, who keys that into the system. So work that out with him or her. And then for the state championship, we'll talk a little bit more about the process with that. But there's another wave in terms of where you need to validate and confirm that anybody who is slotted to advance to the state competition is definitely going to do so. And you can then turn in any slots that you're not using so that they can be reallocated based on the wait list that we have. Excuse me. For coaches, again, this is a little bit of a repeat from the previous slide, but all coaches for Special Olympics need to have their Class A or their volunteer application in and the background check, your protective behavior screening, and the online concussion training, all of which are valid for 3 years. For unified partners and all other volunteers in your program, they need to have the volunteer screening and application and the protective behaviors in as well. They need to have all of them. Having one but not the other, having the volunteer application in but not having protective behaviors, that person is not registered and is not able to participate until they resolve that. For the protective behaviors, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, but just in case, it's an online process. It takes about 10 minutes. We do get or have access to a database that everyone who does this online gets added into. We don't check that every day necessarily, but we do check it frequently, particularly around deadlines and such. But to be safe, in case someone hasn't had the opportunity or doesn't, in some cases, some folks don't complete the process totally correctly. So if you want to, it's not essential, but if you want to, you can have your volunteers just send the email that they get to coaches@somd.org, and that will also get it in our hands, and we'll double check that. For coaches or concussion certification, again, there's 2 different courses. We recommend the CDC Heads Up. They're both free. The Heads Up is a little bit quicker. It's only 30 minutes. The other one from the NFHS, which is National Federation of High School Sports, is 45 minutes. Here for the concussion, we do not have access to a database like we do for the protective behaviors. So there, your coaches definitely need to send in a copy. They can create a certificate when they complete their the course, and just send that certificate off to coaches@somd.org. In many cases, the area may want you to send that to someone in your area program as well, so they have a copy of it. That's up to you, but do so. Check with your area folks on that. And let's see, Franco, it looks like you got a question. Yeah, yes, actually, I'm sorry, Franco. Again, for anybody who joined after we had started the session, yes, we will be sending these slides out along with the link to the recording either tonight or more likely tomorrow. So the bowling events, what do we offer? We offer for the state and regional tournaments singles, traditional doubles, which has 2 athletes on a team, and unified doubles. We do not offer a four-person bowling team option. We've tried that in the past and just have not had enough folks sign up for it to make it worthwhile, so we don't do that. Notes with the ramp bowlers, and we'll have another slide on the ramp bowlers in a little bit. Excuse me. But they will be divisioned with all other competitors and teams in the same event. So if they're a singles athlete who uses a ramp to bowl, they'll be divisioned with other singles bowlers based on their average. And similarly, and whether they're assisted or unassisted, we'll talk about that in a little bit. They'll get put in there. Same goes if they're a doubles athlete, either traditional or unified. We do need in GMS for the type of ramp bowler to be designated. There's a field called level in there. And that's designated as either unassisted or assisted, whether they have someone helping them with that. And then assisted bowlers, ramp bowlers in addition, need to have their designated bowling assistant provided by your program included in GMS as well. There's a comments field with the entry for the athlete, and that can be added, entered in that comments field. That said, those bowling assistants also need to be registered as participating in your program. They need to have their volunteer screenings and certifications and all done and met by the same deadlines. So they need to be added to that training roster by September 24th, just as everyone else does. So some rules reminders. First, there are, every 2 years or so, there's a new set of rules that come out. They came out for virtually all of the sports about 3 weeks ago, and we went through. What they haven't provided yet is a notification of exactly what was changed from the 2016 rules to the 2018 rules. So for bowling, we went through and checked line by line, and the only change that we can find is just the name of the international governing body has changed. So everything else within the printed rules is the same. Again, the international governing body has changed. ABC, or American Bowling Congress, is still the national governing body. That hasn't changed. And I really don't think the international governing body changed. It's just they changed their name from everything that we can tell. Also, again, as a reminder, all tournaments, we use a handicap for bowlers, and that's 100% of the difference between the bowler's average and 200. No change there. With the number of games for the regional and state tournaments, everyone's going to roll 3 games. And then just as a reminder there, if you don't typically roll 3 games in practice or in your other leagues and such where your athletes may be participating, be sure to work with them to build up their stamina and endurance to be able to competitively roll 3 games so that they're not so exhausted by the 3rd game that they can't compete. We will be alternating between the 2 lanes. That's a standard, and that's part of the rules as well. So the athlete will bowl their first frame on one lane of their pair, and then their next frame will be bowled on the lane right next to it, and then back and forth and so on. They should expect that this progression, this is going to happen at the regional tournaments, and you should be training your athletes in the ability to do that. In very rare situations, the tournament chair may make a decision to not alternate lanes on a particular set of lanes. They wouldn't make it across the board. Please note that's very rare, and it's not based on the athlete's preference or whether they have been properly trained or not for that. It's really based around some of the needs of the facility or the tournament and such. So I don't want you to be surprised on the odd chance. I don't think we did that for anybody last year, but there may be some rare situation where that does happen. That is not the norm, and there's usually a good reason for it. Fouls, again, foul and foul line violations will be called for at all competitions, leagues, regional, so on, and that can either be called by the foul detecting device, whatever the beam is at the foul line itself, or by an official. And just because there is a beam at the foul line does not mean that it can't be called by an official. There are ways, it may seem odd, but there are ways that the athlete could actually foul and not actually trip the alarm. So it can be either one. And then only point this out because I heard something from someone the other day about this, but athletes who use bumpers, that can be a great training technique and training tool. If they're using them for competition, they are not eligible for either the regional tournaments or the state championship. If they can't bowl without the bumpers, they really aren't ready to move to that competition. Lane courtesy. This kind of spells out the whole spiel with that. Read it at your leisure. The gist of it is, if someone else is getting ready to bowl, your bowler can't, just kind of jump ahead, if you would, if they're in an adjoining lane and such. It becomes a distraction and affects the bowler next door. This just kind of spells it out with that. Also, they should avoid using someone else's balls and so on. The one other clarification here is that a bowler failing to observe lane courtesy, that is something that a coach of an affected athlete can protest. And it is possible, hopefully it doesn't happen, but it is possible that an athlete could be disqualified for not properly observing lane courtesy. So it's something you need to be working with your bowlers on, and they should be trained well with that. Alternates, this of course is just for doubles. It doesn't apply to singles, but you can have a singles bowler serve as an alternate for a doubles team. You don't have to designate what team it is. It's just they're listed as an alternate for that. However, when it comes to the time of the tournament, they need to be designated whether they're doing the doubles or not. And once they do, if they are moved into serving as an alternate or serving on a doubles team, they're locked into that. So if they do that if they're on a doubles team at the regional tournament, and they're on that doubles team if that team does advance to the state championship. They basically committed to that team. And then also in terms of coaching, what we're talking about there is coaching during the competition. The coaches aren't allowed down on the lanes for that purpose. When we're talking about that in that competition area, it can't be down by the scorer's table. However, they can provide advice from the spectator area, which is also sort of the coaching area given the facilities that we have. However, the bowlers can't go up to their coach. Or leave the bowling area to do that, and any advice there cannot result in a delay of game. Should also point out, this is not something that can be done between rolls of the ball. It can be between their frames. It's just not realistic to have things move forward and such between their first and second roll within a given frame. So this is just between frames. So ramp bowling and assistance, we've had a lot of improvement on this over the last several years, but want to reemphasize this. We reworded this a little bit to try to make the points a little bit clearer. The whole point behind the things with the ramp bowling and assistance is it needs to be the athlete who is earning the score for whatever the pinfall is. The ramp assistant should not be the one who is earning and aiming and so on down the line. It really needs to reflect the athlete. And if the best the athlete can do in handling a ramp and directing and aiming the ramp is they get 2 pins down in a frame, then that's the best the athlete can do, but it is what the athlete did. So just as reminders here, it's the athlete needs to be the person who is pushing the ball on the ramp. It can't be something where we've seen this not for a little while, but where the athlete touches it and the coach or the assistant, rather the ramp assistant or bowling assistant, actually pushes the ball. No, that's not permitted. In terms of setting it, and this does work. And quite frankly, if your athlete can't do it this way, they're probably not ready to be competing at a competition, at a tournament. But the process, and this is by the Special Olympics rules, not something Maryland's doing, is the bowling assistant, they can put the ramp in the general location, but then turns their back and moves and positions the ramp based on the direction from the athlete. Either the athlete is telling him or her telling the bowling assistant where to put the ramp or how to aim it, or is gesturing with that. And again, if they aren't able to do that, then they probably, I mean, they can bowl recreationally with your program, but they probably aren't ready then for a competition. There is, in some very rare situations, if there's a real challenge of a communication nature, we can permit where the ramp assistant can face the pins, but again, the positioning of the ramp needs to be entirely at the direction of the athlete. And bottom line is, if not following this, and I'm sorry, I should also point out that exception that I'm talking about there, rare situations where we may allow that, that's something that Maryland is doing. That's not something that's in the Special Olympics rules. That would also need to be approved in advance by the tournament director, and also, again, you really need to be sure that you're not putting your athletes in an uncomfortable or an inappropriate situation. I mean, the simple fact is not everyone may be ready to compete in a tournament, even if they can bowl recreationally and enjoy it in a training program. Again, failure to do that can result in the athlete being disqualified from the competition. And then also, just as a reminder, bowling assistants need to meet the same requirements and the same deadlines as any other volunteer in your program in terms of having their volunteer application in and their protective behaviors handled. They're not a coach, so they don't have to have the concussion certification, but they can, it's not going to hurt, but they do need to meet those requirements, and they need to have them done. They need to be included on the training roster by September 24th. They're a part of your program. Attire, no changes here, but bowling attire, basically, they need to be, for a shirt, it needs to be a collared shirt. They don't have to be tucked in. They need to be wearing bowling shoes, either their own, or they can use the ones that are from the facility. No hats or rimless headwear, no headphones. They can, if noise is a concern, they can use earplugs, as we have had at both the regional and the state tournament now for, I think, the last 3 years. We've had earplugs available. No one's asked for them. We've had them in the control center at each of those. We'll continue to do that for at least one more year, but they are permitted. For some athletes, that might be more of a distraction than the noise is. For attire, slacks and such, they need to be similar to like Dockers or something similar to that. The color does not matter, but the no cutoff shorts, no shorts above the kneecap, no jeans, no sweatpants, no exercise pants, no leggings and such, and so on, as you can see there. And there'll be a quick inspection prior to the start of competition at each of the different regional tournaments and the state tournament as well. Qualifying for the state tournament, athletes need to have a 15-game average for this season prior to the regional tournament. It can be a combination of games either at other tournaments if you're doing it, if you have league play going on either in addition to or as a part of your training program, or if they roll complete games during your practice sessions. Those can all contribute to that for a 15-game average. Then also, in order to move on to the state championship, they do need to compete at their designated regional tournament, and they need to be selected. So I had mentioned this earlier. This is no change from the past. It's been this way for, this will, I guess, be the 5th year now. All gold medalists will advance, and then some of the silver medalists will advance from the regional tournaments. It'll be a random draw, and the number will be based on, it will really depend on how many gold medalists there are to the maximum capacity for the facility for the championship. We will put a wait list together. We'll do the drawing no later than the Tuesday following the regional tournaments and get that information out to you so you know who has advanced. We really recommend, based on your, you'll know the results from the tournaments as you leave, to start checking with anybody who earned a gold medal or who earned a silver medal to see if they would be available to advance to the state tournament if they're selected, because you will have a relatively quick turnaround of having to let us know whether folks can advance or not. And that's really, we're not trying to put a gun to your head or make you rush, but we do need to have a pretty quick turnaround so that we can let other folks know if someone on the wait list can move up. Typically, this is not a guarantee. Typically, somewhere between 10 and 15 athletes off the wait list have moved up each year. It really can vary. It all depends upon the ones who made the official list, if you will. I can tell you that if the athlete did not earn at least a silver medal, they're really there's no, we're not going to go below silver. It's there's always enough competitors to fill the available spots between the gold and the silver medalists. So if they have a bronze, don't worry about asking them on whether they want to move, be able to go to the state tournament. The regional tournaments, these are the tentative assignments. This is what we had last year. And the facilities that we're utilizing are the same. Frederick Terrace Lanes would be Allegheny, Carroll, Garrett, Frederick, and Washington counties. Gaithersburg, Bowl America is Charles, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties, as well as all of the unified doubles teams, regardless of what area they're from. Ellicott City, Cecil, Harford, and Howard counties, as well as Baltimore City. And then Glen Burnie, Bowl America, Baltimore, Anne Arundel, Calvert, and St. Mary's counties, and the Lower and Upper Shore. Upper Shore has not had a bowling program for a bit, but in case they do, we have them assigned there. This is all tentative. We'll look on the next slide on some information that we have. We will let you know no later than, I'm sorry, all the regional tournaments are on Sunday, November the 11th. And then any changes in locations, we'll let you know by the 26th of October, which is after the competition registration deadline. However, in advance of that, what we would very much appreciate is if you have any significant change in the number of bowlers that you expect to move on to your state tournament, please let us know by October the 8th. So here, what you see in the chart here are the number of, the first column, the singles and traditional doubles bowlers. This is the number of athletes who bowled in that, or were registered to bowl. Some of them were scratched ultimately, but we had the capacity to handle these numbers there last year. And then the unified doubles, these are teams here. So only 6 areas had teams there and such. And St. Mary's County, if there's a coach, I don't know whether Annette, if you're on, or yeah, Annette, you're on. So if you can hang on for a minute or two afterwards, I just want to touch base with you about the number that you have here, just to clarify. So what we'd like you to do is by October the 8th, if you expect an increase of more than 3 to 5 bowlers attending the regional tournaments, it's not how many are participating in your program, it's how many you expect to attend the regional tournaments. We really would like to know by October the 8th, and you can send that in to Steve. We don't need the names at that point, but we need to know the numbers. The reason being is if there are major increases, we're getting pretty close to capacity at several of these facilities. If there are major increase, we'll certainly move delegations around within reason to try to maximize the space that we use. But it is possible if there are several programs that have significant increases that we may not be able to accommodate all of those increases, and we may need to put a limit on that. So just if you can let us know by the 8th, that would be of October. That's just a little less than a month from now. That would be great. Again, it's not binding, but I will tell you, if you don't let us know by the 8th and then you send in significantly more than you had last year, we're probably going to be contacting you and telling you you got to cut. And I really don't want to put anybody in that position. So that's that. This is just a summary of the different deadlines and dates that we have here. So this could be a very helpful slide if you want to print it out or have it handy. So you got the registration deadline on the 24th, last day for forms. The 8th of October, let us know if you have any significant increase for the regional tournaments. The regional deadline, competition deadline is the 18th of October. We have the pre-competition webinar for the regional on the 6th. Then we actually have the tournaments on the 11th. We'll let you know by 2 days later who advanced or who was selected to advance along with the waiting list. That'll go out to the head coaches and to the area directors. So they'll have that. You then have, it's at 6 days to turn around and let us know who's actually using the slots. Again, it's really important to do that so we want to use every single slot that we can. The only way we can do that is to find out who's not going to use them. So again, I really recommend on the 11th, as you see who is finishing, check with folks and see if they're able to use the spot. It'll save you a lot of time and trouble later. We'll have another quick webinar prior to the state competition on the 27th of November. That should be relatively short. And then we have the state bowling tournament on the 2nd of December. Here on these slides, I'm not going to read through this to you. There is a coach's code of conduct. There actually is a rather broad set of codes of conduct for athletes, for volunteers, spectators, and so on. But just wanted to have this in here so you're aware of it. In a nutshell, it's treating everybody with respect, really challenging and pushing your athletes to do their best, so on down the line. There's obviously some specifics here. There's no alcohol, no smoking or vaping products, appropriate language, so on down the line, and then watching out for the health and safety of the athletes. Just want to be sure you all are aware of that. And then we have some questions. One thing before we go to this, I want to touch on briefly some registration forms. We will not be going through every form here, but just a couple highlights because a couple things have popped up recently. This is, again, work with your area leadership on who gets the forms and such. For the athletes, again, they need their medical. This information's here if you need it. The big thing I want to make sure folks know, any new medical that you submit needs to be on this new form. We will not accept a medical, a newly submitted medical on the old form. That old form was supposed to be retired back in 2016. We recently had a few medicals turned in that are in that old form. I'm not even going to show you the old form. If it doesn't look like this, we can't accept it. It may seem like we're being really officious with that. It really is all about there's certain language and such on this form that is required from an insurance standpoint and a liability standpoint, as well as on the release that's part of the package. So again, don't have your athlete get disqualified by having them submit the wrong form, because we cannot accept those older forms. Similarly, skip through this again, read this at your leisure. For volunteers, there's a new 2-page volunteer application. Again, this has also had to have been used or in place, replacing everything by 2016. We cannot accept the older forms. We will make some adjustments, just as an FYI. There is no need to submit a social security number anymore. If you wish to, that's fine, but there's no need for them to do that. But anyhow, they need to utilize this form. That's the only one that we can accept. If it's on a different form, you or your area person is going to have it sent back to them and told we can't use it. And the athlete or the volunteer, if it's right at that deadline, they're not going to be able to participate. So yeah, the student reference, and then the rest of the forms are all the same. But I wanted to be sure, particularly since we've had recently a few. It was the medicals that we had to come in with the wrong form. And I mean, I hate having to call somebody and tell them we can't use it, but we cannot accept that form anymore. So that said, checking to see if there's any questions. Again, you can either raise your hand in the control panel, and I'll open up your phone line or your computer line. Looks like almost everybody's on the computer. That's great, as opposed to on a phone. Or type it into the question box, and we'll give folks a moment to see if there is anyone. Okay. Seeing none. I thank you for taking a few minutes, well, about half an hour tonight, to go through this. Annette, if you could stay on the line, I'll kill the recording in a moment. But if you can stay on the line, I just want to touch base on something with you about your numbers. And everyone else, have a great rest of your evening, and appreciate you taking, again, the time to be with us. Look forward to seeing you all throughout the season for bowling, as well as I know many of you coach other sports as well. So thank you much.